Alright, settle in, cause we've got a bit to get through. Kira rescued a prisoner of war called Lee Nalas from the Cardigans because of an earring. He's well liked by all, and the government didn't know what to do with him, so they gave him a fancy title and Kira's job. That means she had the chance for a little hollybobs in a monastery, though the guy who invited her might have done it because a magic orb that isn't an orb made him horny. The same orb gave her visions of sexy times too, so maybe the prophets are just into that sort of thing. That means she's on the planet instead of Deep Space Nine when a group of racist dickbags called the Badly Drawn Circle, who've been only a nuisance up to this point, decide to get proper nasty. They're run by the minister who gave Lee Nalas Kira's job, a decision made to get him out of the way so there'd be no interference. Oh, and Odo found out that the shit circle are actually being armed by the Cardigans, because this is just a plan to destabilise the new government and get rid of the Federation so they can invade again. Maybe they missed the Hasperat. Kira got kidnapped by Terrible Circle, but it doesn't matter because we went and rescued her, during which we may or may not have left a Bajoran security guard behind. Whatever. That means she's back on the station with everybody else when Benny Sisko is told to get out of Dodge by an admiral, but decides to ignore that and stick around so he can meet the two Bajoran ships on their way here to take over the station and kick out all the aliens. On top of that, Vedek Sin, the Delphic douchebag, has agreed to back the minister and his wonky circle mates if she gets to be the new prophet pope. You know, I reckon she might turn out to be a wrong 'un. In we go for the final part of the trilogy. Sisko's telling some Starfleet crew that he's decided to ignore his orders to leave on a flimsy pretext, but is giving everybody else a chance to bugger off if that's what they want. Nobody does, because the one thing that unifies all Starfleet graduates is the belief that it's fine for them to ignore literally the most important rule they're given, as long as they feel like they've got a half-decent excuse. The uniforms may be staying, but their families are getting the hell out of here, which is ironic in a way, as they're not bound by the Prime Directive Sisko was told he needed to uphold in the last episode. Lots of people trying to leave on a handful of megashuttles means many of them are going to be disappointed, but that's okay because Quark thinks he can make a lot of money from selling seats to desperate evacuees. At least the kids are being prioritised, but not always in the way they'd like. Eggnog and Jake have both got seats, just not on the same ship and not going to the same place. Jake's pissed off at the news, though Eggnog gives a little speech about them being strong enough friends that even their parents were forced to abandon trying to break them up, which is heartwarming in its own way. It's certainly a contrast to the conversation O'Brien's having with Keiko, who wants him to come with them. It's as difficult a discussion as you would expect. Officers might have signed up for the danger, but their families didn't sign up for being widows or widowers and orphans. The communications blackout with Bajor is preventing us from sharing the knowledge that this whole thing is being orchestrated by the Cardigans, news that would likely cause a very swift change in public opinion of the Circle. We could go to Bajor and tell the ruling body in person if we had a spare ship, but we've only got 3 megashuttles and they're all busy evacuating people. Lee Nalas might have an answer to that, an old resistance base on a moon that may still have some ships. With a bit of luck, they might even work. On the plus side, one of Dax's old hosts knows about such things, so she and Kira go off to get a lift from a megashuttle while Odo drags Quark in. His little money-making scheme has been rumbled, partly because he sold more tickets than he had seats, and Sisko gets a bit handsy at the news before buggering off to try and solve things. He's largely ignored by the panicking crowd, but Lee Nalas has better luck convincing many of the Bajorans trying to flee that they're acting like arseholes and the other species are the ones in danger. It's not a particularly rousing speech, but it comes from a legend, so I guess that counts for something, and many of them leave with him. Sisko says goodbye to Jake and hands him a letter, just in case he does a dead. The ships have just departed as Quark arrives with a distinctly metallic-sounding case, which must come as a bit of a shock as he had a seat. It would appear his brother Rom decided Quark's ticket would be better used by the Darbo girl he took with him. 3 Bajoran ships are docking with Deep Space Nine, which is 50% more than we were told in the last episode, but maybe they had a baby. They disgorge a bunch of GI Bajorans, one of whom is the general that told Sisko he was a patriot when asked if he'd be loyal to the government. I guess he's going with the alternate interpretation of that term. They're a little surprised to find no resistance when they board and assume everybody's buggered off. Not so, as Benny Sisko and friends are watching them from above and dressed in casual clothes. I wonder if that means they'll be shot as spies. To Kira and Dax, who found both the old base and a 4-legged spider thing that Dax doesn't care for. Just as well there's still a ship here then, and they start work on getting it to fly. Back on the station, General Traitorous Bastard is worried, despite the excitable optimism of one of his officers. Security systems are down and the whole command staff is missing, including Odo, so he orders there to be random periodic scans for unexpected organic material in ops, just in case the bugger sneaks in. The minister is inclined to agree with General Traitor, especially after hearing that Lee Nalas is unaccounted for, though wants him taken alive. He'll be far more useful lending legitimacy to the new regime than as a martyr. They just have to find the right bribe. As Kira and Dax are meeting with some technical problems trying to get the ship running, General Traitor is having some issues of his own. The officer that was far too eager to report success wants to send out groups and look for intruders, but the general knows that's precisely what guerrilla fighters want the most. The lights going out from sabotage is enough to convince the officer to do it anyway, and raises one or two questions about how rank works in the Bajoran military. That's our cue to do something. We're spread out over the station from the looks of things, and Odo, who's being a wall today, informs us of a search party. Bashir and his group are the closest, so it's his job to take care of them. He's pretty good at it for a beginner, and their ambush takes the search party by surprise. They surrender without a shot fired, which is a great victory until you think about the logistics of keeping prisoners of war in ventilation shafts. One successful battle does not mean the end of the war, though, especially when fought on multiple fronts. Kira and Dax have managed to get airborne, but are having a pretty bad time of things, what with half of the ship not working properly, and now they're getting shot at to boot. Going into Bajor's atmosphere is a good idea, says Kira, as it'll limit the superior enemy ships. That's how they end up nailing one of them with manual firing, but the other proves a bit too tricksy and evens the score. Their half-working ship loses the remaining 50%, and the result is a landing that would make even Tom Paris cringe. The overeager officer has cornered Sisko, O'Brien and Lee Nalas in one of Quark's holosuites. Except no, he hasn't, obviously, because it's a holosuite and the guy is a complete sodding lemon. The holograms disappear and real Sisko gives them a call to tell them all about the whole weapons supplied by the Cardigans thing. Overeager officer is teleported back to Ops, presumably to deliver the message to the general, but instead lies and says he was released because he promised them amnesty, so I guess he's either in on it or doesn't care as long as he gets power. The security system rebooting means they can start scanning for us. Finding nothing isn't the failure it sounds like, as it means Sisko and company must be hiding in the shielded conduits, and that leaves them with very few places to run. Speaking of running, Kira and Dax are trying to evade capture after their very emergency landing. That would be awkward even if Kira wasn't badly wounded, and she tries to order Dax to leave her. Tries and fails, that is, as according to the Federation, we technically withdrew yesterday, so Kira isn't her superior anymore. Attempting to argue the point becomes somewhat moot when Kira has a little nap. Back to the station, and Odo's warning the rest of them that those conduits are about to be filled with sleepy time gas. That doesn't leave us with a lot of options, but Sisko still thinks we have a card left to play, getting Lee Nalas to convince the general here that he's being used. Kira wakes up in a nice, comfortable bed to find Vedek Bareil there. Not like that, she was rescued by some of his monks who went out to look for a downed ship and found her and Dax. Handy coincidence, but maybe he saw it in a vision, in between all the porn. She's been resting for 6 hours, but that's understandable what with the broken hip they fixed, and it's not been time wasted either, as Dax is now dressed up to look like she's from the monastery. That's part of Bareil's plan to get them to the government building to present their evidence, as religious folks are the only ones not getting the shit beaten out of them for being on the streets. Back to the station we go and find Bashir's leading an attack on some Bajoran military at an airlock. That causes overeager officer to send as many people as he can there and go to oversee things himself. It's over before he gets there, according to whoever's calling the general. Bashir's people have surrendered and the general orders them brought to Sisko's office. It'll be quite the reunion, as everybody else is already in there, waiting to explain to the general exactly what he's caught up in. It's a similar scene on Bajor. The minister leading the circle clocks Kira when she unveils herself and tries to have her removed, but she's already made the accusation before it can happen. Vedek Sin may be a douchebag, but she understands what a turning tide looks like and doesn't want to be on the losing side. It's her who says we should look at the evidence, meaning she'll be remembered as the one who took charge. For his part, the minister says he fully supports the investigation, but only once he sees it's going to happen, regardless of his opinion. I'll let you decide if he knew about the Cardigans or not. To the station once more, and overeager officer is back with Bashir and Quark, only to find a very pissed-off general. He's proper fuming that he wasn't told about the possible Cardigan involvement, certainly not helped by having been told that evidence has been presented on Bajor. The general decides to go back home for a massive bollocking, and probably a change of career, giving Sisko command of the station once more. Feels a bit premature before the government has reviewed the evidence, but we've only got a couple of minutes left in the episode, so he doesn't have much of a choice. Overeager officer disagrees with this decision to the point of pulling a gun, which gives Lee Nalas a chance to dive in front of it and get a little bit shot. As Odo drags overeager officer away, Lee Nalas does a dead, and is probably glad to be rid of the whole bloody situation, given how much of a pain in the arse it's been. Kira is very sad. Probably fair, given what she's been through, but losing Lee Nalas was the kicker for her. She's still of the opinion that he was a hero, and is mourning him as such. Sisko knows it's bullshit, but tells O'Brien that he'll lie through his teeth till the day he dies for the sake of the Bajoran people. I'm not convinced that encouraging people to pin all of their hopes and dreams on a single person is really the most healthy choice for progress, but I'm sure it won't cause any problems in the future. Thoughts of the future will have to wait, though, as the megashuttles are back and have brought their evacuees with them, so we'll leave Sisko to spend some quality time with his son, and Quark to have a very awkward conversation with his brother, until the next adventure. And so ends the story of the Bajoran Civil War, mostly before it even started, and it was okay, fine, did the job. As we said before, a power vacuum and subsequent scramble was a logical progression politically, so the setup is fine, and the bits with getting Vedek Sin on board give us more insight into what an opportunistic wanker she is, especially when added to how quickly she abandoned that route after seeing it was going pear-shaped. The whole thing kind of fizzles away at the end, though. Part of that is because, in the council chamber, the coup is played as a very sterilised, perfectly civil event. Were these the same councillors as the provisional government that got replaced, and if so, how does that even work? Did they all just agree to work for a dictator? There's no chance they're unaware of events given all the violence we've been told is happening on the streets. Or are they newly appointed, suggesting the people willing to be the faces of an actual coup decide to draw the line at a data pad? They must be the most polite conspirators I've ever seen, if that's the case. The solution, I think, would have been to show that the proceedings are being broadcast to the general public. Their responses make far more sense in the context of it being watched by all of Bajor, regardless of who makes up the council. A handful of power-hungry arseholes might be willing to keep the secret in private, but they'd be lynched before sunset if the public knew they'd ignored it. There are a couple of other flaws to consider too, with the waste of Lee Nalas as a character probably the most glaring. An episode building him up, another mostly ignoring him, and then finally killing him off for no real impact seems a missed opportunity to me. Keeping him around as Navok, a figurehead without any real power, would have left open a logical conduit for learning about events on Bajor, and one from a largely neutral source who's disillusioned by the whole sordid thing. We wouldn't even have needed to include the character himself if they wanted to keep down costs on guest appearances. Just saying that whatever data we got came from Lee would have been a sufficient nod. It's part of a greater complaint towards Trek, I guess, that tendency to have incidental characters with a lifespan as long as the story. There's no genuine sense of loss for someone that new to the viewer, and it cuts down your options to boot. That might make slightly more sense for a ship going somewhere new every week, but we're on a static space station and have had a whole season to try and get out of that mindset. The last little nag I have is the scene with people jabbering around Kira in the government building. I presume it was supposed to be a nod back to her orb vision, but it wasn't particularly well handled. There's no real payoff there beyond, look at this, it's kind of similar to the thing we showed you earlier, and fell flat as a result. If she'd shared just that part of her vision with Bareil and the two then had a knowing glance when it happened, that would have been a far more satisfying connection and played more heavily into the whole mysticism angle as well. That's enough whining for now, as I think we're making the story sound worse than it actually was. We do have some other things to touch on though, so let's go through them. For starters, we have another entry in our What is Odo series. During the takeover of DS9, the General has his underlings scanning for biological material to track down Odo. This suggests he still emits life signs even if he takes on the form and function of other things. It could be an error on the General's part, I suppose, but Odo was studied by a Bajoran scientist, so it's arguable they'd have the most data on him. If it is accurate, this constitutes a serious weakness in his ability to mimic anything inorganic. We'll assume Quark must not know, or he'd be constantly carrying a tricorder whenever he's up to his dodgy shit. Another point of note is O'Brien using Bashir's first name unprompted. There was a bit of friction about it in the first season, you'll recall, where Bashir sort of ordered O'Brien, but not quite, to use Julian instead. It got knocked on the head at the end of that episode, so this coming quite naturally a few episodes later is a nice little touch within the larger picture of them all getting along. The last point of note is Eggnog saying to Jake, "We'll be back in school driving Mrs. O'Brien crazy in a few days." We'll assume then that he's been allowed back into Keiko's school. The last we heard of that, Jake was teaching Eggnog on his own time. I'd be curious to hear the logic behind that decision, as the most recent reference we've had to the school was it getting blown up, and that's hardly conducive to parental confidence. Before we go, can we take a moment to explore the term sub-impulse radar? It's the name Lee Nallas gives to the ships hidden on a moon, the ones Kira and Dax go to fetch. The thing is that the term impulse speed in Trek refers to anything below the speed of light. Indeed, it's a variable that refers to the top speed of whatever vessel they're in at the time when using conventional engines. Whenever somebody refers to it, they're basically saying as fast as we can go without warp or some fraction thereof. In this context, then, sub-impulse would be stationary. In the interests of fairness, they could be referring to impulse engine as a tech and saying that the craft in question uses a different, lesser form of propulsion. But that doesn't really make sense from a linguistic point of view. New discoveries don't tend to redefine older methods, even if they become overwhelmingly dominant. We don't refer to horses as sub-internal combustion engine, for example. And Sisko himself seems to dismiss that possibility by using the term with another tech and calling them sub-impulse thruster configurations, a strong argument for it being a reference to speed rather than machinery. I'll openly admit that this is one of the more pedantic issues I've taken with Trek on the channel, and the scene does get its message across of these being somewhat antiquated and lesser vehicles, which is the most important part. I'm mentioning it here not so much to highlight the misstep, but rather as another example of how precarious the craft of writing can be for science fiction, something we've touched on a few times before during the Voyager run and bears repeating here. A single, slightly misused, completely fabricated term can be enough of a bump in the road to jar a viewer familiar with the franchise out of their immersion. The bar for quality is often far higher in hard sci-fi than contemporary fiction or fantasy, and that's something people like me who enjoy poking holes in things are wise to remind ourselves from time to time. End of episode.
Alright then, lad, give that a go.
Give what a go? Oh my god, I've got a new voice.
Hey, that's not bad, is it? Oh, and I've set up the button on the back of your head to take voice input.
Where did you get the parts to do that?
Same place as the Monopoly board. What do you think then? Does it feel like you?
It'll take some getting used to. I think I just need to hear myself for a while and it'll be less weird than it is now.
Fair enough. Why don't we talk about getting out of here, two birds and all that?
We could just wait until we've served our sentences?
Well, how long will that take?
For me? Next week. For you? About 8 years.
Wait, why am I getting 8 years?
You bit that guy right on the cock, remember?
That were a stress response.
It was certainly stressful for the guy whose dick you bit. Woof.